What I am going to review is the Smokeless Range 2.0, which is an upgrade to the Smokeless Range 1.0 that came out at the beginning of the year. This is a free upgrade if you have the 1.0 software itself. Otherwise, you can get it through their website for about $500. You can get it cheaper on Amazon, and if you're an NRA instructor, they give you a pretty decent discount. What it comes with in the box is pretty similar to what 1.0 came with. It comes with the camera, and it comes with the software code, download code. In addition to that, you're also going to need something to project on, like a projector or a big screen TV. I even gotten to work on smaller LCD screens, such as my laptop. Anything that this camera can point at, you're pretty much good to go when it comes to displaying the screen. What they recommend is about a $3,000 projector, but you can get one for a lot cheaper. I believe I got mine for about $400, as long as it has the right resolution and it has the correct amount of minimum lumens. And generally, as long as you get a name brand projector, you're pretty much good to go. If you've done anything with Smokeless Range 1.0, then one of the more obvious upgrades they've done to 2.0 is they really increased the graphical user interface. And just the drills and the graphic looks itself looks so much better than it did in 1.0. One of the major complaints I've always had was that it looked like an early 2000s Flash game. And when you're dropping, $300 to $500 on the software, plus a projector and a computer and the laser trainers, I mean, you want something that you can look at and show that this is something that is worth the amount of money that you spent on it. And so that was my major complaint with the 1.0. And as you can tell, they really upgraded it. And as we'll go through each one later, not only did they upgrade this menu at the beginning, but they've upgraded all the drills. They've really went out of the way to try to make this thing as smooth and as easy for people to just get into as possible. And so one of the main things they did is they really tried to streamline how you set up the camera. When you installed the first one, they gave you two icons. One to set up the camera that you had to set up first, and two had to be the drill software. And now, at the time, that's really what I was interested in, was the camera software. I was very glad that they separated the two, because I wasn't a big fan of the drill. So at the time, and even now, I almost always use the camera software with other things. I've used it with games that I've picked up off of Steam. I've used them with emulators for different systems. A bunch of stuff I'm going to cover later in a different video. But for now, what they decided to do, instead of separate that, is they decided to try and combine them. You can still access them. It's more like a shortcut that's built in. So instead of being two separate icons, you just go right into the Smokeless Range. And up in the top right corner, it's going to tell you whether or not it sees the camera or not. So you still have to set and calibrate the camera, which is fine, because I think the camera is just really amazing, especially if you have a mobile system. I mean, I take this software and I use it at my school. I use it at my home, I use it at different shows, and I use it at all kinds of different stuff. And the camera itself is almost worth the money just by itself. As long as you can point the camera at a screen, it almost always works. It's very quick. The setup is very simple. I don't really know how they can make that part any easier. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through that setup real quick to kind of demonstrate it. Normally you would open it up in a second box or a second icon, but now they've combined it up into the top right corner. And so we're going to go through that real quick. Once you click the icon, it takes you to the calibration page. And the main goal you want to do here is make sure that your camera that's plugged in is pointed at whatever it is you are projecting against. It should fit nicely inside the box. Once you get it nicely inside the box, it doesn't have to be straight on. I've tried it from different angles, and as long as it fits in the box completely, then you're pretty much set. You can also invert it in case your projector or camera is upside down, and you can also darken and lighten it depending on how you want it to go. But once you have it set up and ready to go, then you just end up going down and hitting calibrate. Once you hit calibrate, it starts its auto calibration sequence. Basically, it's going to show a bunch of flashing lights, against the wall for the camera to pick up. Once it picks up all the dots, it starts checking to see if the lighting is good and if the contrast is good. Usually at this point it may or may not give you an error, and if it doesn't, it sends you to this little targeting screen. This allows you to shoot against the screen with your laser, whether it be the SIRT or any other kind, and it allows you to verify that your laser is good to go. Once you have acknowledged that the laser is where it wants to be, then you're able to hit save and it sends you back. An important thing to notice here, especially with SIRT lasers, SIRT being the type that the longer, as long as you have the trigger held down, the laser is going to project. And so one of the big issues is that if you hold the trigger on too long, it's going to pick it up as multiple shots. So what I like to do to make sure that the testing is, or the calibration is good, is that I shoot at a corner, and with the trigger held down, I start making circles in different designs. One of the big improvements they've done in this version compared to the last, especially in the driver updates, is that it seems to be able to take this a lot better. Beforehand, as long as I held that laser down and start spinning it around, it would have a tendency of picking up multiple shots. So when I'm shooting against targets, instead of it picking up as one shot, it would come up as 2 or 3 shots. One of the big improvements here is that I'm able to make circles around here without too much issue, without having to pick up. Of course, this is going to depend on the lighting situations, whether it be a lot of outside lights or not. But once I'm able to get that good to go, then I can just start shooting at it. And so I've had, since this 2.0 update, I've had very little trouble with SIRTs. I've had very little trouble with any of the other lasers that works with this system, and that right there has been a huge improvement, because now I'm a lot less worried about multiple shots when I'm using my SIRT pistol or my SIRT rifle. I've gone ahead and switched over to the screen capture to make the audio and visual a little bit better, because when I was running it, as you saw in the corner, it's a lot harder to pick up. But like I said, as you can see, the Smokeless Range intro itself, the main page looks a lot smoother. It looks a lot more professional than it did before, with all the settings up in the corner. The icons each look a lot nicer and more professional. So we're going to go through each one and start playing with them. The first one we'll go to is Bomb Blast, and originally I did not like this one. This was probably my least favorite, because originally it just was a bomb that would kind of bounce around, and every time you shot it, it would just kind of change its direction. But here, you can already see that the user interface has improved. The buttons are larger, the options are a lot better, and instead of having to use the mouse all the time, I can get away with generally just using my SIRT itself and just kind of shooting at the screen. This makes everything a whole lot smoother and a whole lot more professional looking than it did originally. So we're going to go ahead and start the Bomb Blast. Like I said, originally this was one of my least favorites, and now I kind of almost always start with it, because instead of just shooting it, every time you shoot one of them, they explode into a bunch of smaller little ones, depending on the settings you have set up. So I made this a lot more enjoyable and a lot more fun, kind of as an intro warm-up, than it did initially. So it's gone from being probably my least favorite to one of my most favorite. I almost always start with this one, and it just makes it a lot easier and a lot more fun to play with. Another new addition they added to this is a way of keeping track of shooters' scores and names. It allows you to kind of compete against yourself and other people. The only major downside to this is that it does not seem to save it when you switch over. So when you exit out and come back, it does not seem to save it for the next time. But it does make it a little bit more fun. We'll move on to the next one, which is Can Toss, which, the graphics alone, as you can tell, the icons look a lot better and everything is just a lot smoother. And they've added things like multiple shooters, and even different type of setups for the launch can options itself, which makes it a whole lot more fun to play with than it was initially. I'm going to go ahead and start it. The background uses a picture instead of like the kind of drawing that they had on before, and the cans look a lot better than it used to. Even though the sound doesn't seem to be working on your end. But each one's a little bit more fun to play with, and it's more interesting than it was before, especially when you start playing with this with multiple people. Just like all the other ones, it allows you to add a score and to compare. So the next one we're going to go to is the dueling tree. The dueling tree is pretty similar to what it was before. You get a few little more options such as target alignment, and you can enable the timer along with increasing and decreasing your target counts. But this one used to kind of be the only two-player game you had on here officially. And one of the issues we had, and I haven't really had a chance to test out here as I did at the school, is that if you had both people shooting at the same time, it did have a tendency of not picking up both shots. So if both people shoot at the same time, it just kind of ignores both of them. I have not had a chance to try it out on this one, but hopefully that's something that's been improved. But that one's pretty straightforward as it was in the last one. Shooting target's nicer. You can see here I have it set up for 2 shooters. This is really nice for classroom type settings. It allows me to split this up a lot more evenly depending on the people. I can mix their targets, I can move their targets, and do all kinds of a lot more fun stuff with it than I could before. You can see I can move the target back, I can move it closer, and the only kind of downside of this is it's definitely easier to use the mouse to move it farther back, because otherwise you're just going to sit there and shoot at it forever. But once you do that, hitting it's pretty straightforward, just like any other target. I believe there's a way you can add your own targets to it, but I have not really had a time to really, or interest I guess, in playing in that aspect of it. But once you've done that, as you can see, you can switch it back to one shooter, multiple shooter. The single shooter lets you use a start timer, which is a lot more fun to play with depending on the situation you have set up here. And so it's a lot more fun now than it used to be. One of the worries I have is, especially when you want to start doing longer range stuff with the SIRT laser, is the whole sight over bore. But so far I've tried my SIRT AR in quite a few different setups without much issue. So it's been a lot of fun. Trap shooting is one of the ones that I haven't really played with much, because I keep meaning on buying kind of like a laser adapter, an airsoft laser adapter type thing for my my airsoft shotgun. I figured that would be more fun. One of the kind of nice things on this one is the shoot boxes for each one is a little bit bigger, so you don't have to be right on it, which helps if you're using a shotgun type thing. So you don't have to be right on each one in order to get the targets that you want to. As you can see, with it on pairs, I did a terrible job trying to shoot that with the SIRT pistol. But it's still a lot of fun. That's one I'm hoping to kind of get back into more when I get the adapter for my shotgun for it. And like the other ones, you have a chance to kind of save your score. Next one we're going to do is match target. I kind of wish they upgraded, the targets a little bit, because the background's nice and the GUI looks a lot better, but the targets themselves are kind of like just straight out of paint. But they give you all kinds of options and targets. And this one is definitely one I like to play with, especially with shooters or new shooters, is that it kind of gives you a way to get them to think a little bit. So instead of just shooting anything that pops up, it kind of forces them to pay more attention. This would be a nice one if you could switch them out and to kind of your own custom thing. But as you can see, once you start, the background looks pretty nice, but the shapes themselves you have to match to, or they look like that. Still a fun one. They give you options where you can kind of see it in the bottom, or the audio itself will tell you, what color, what shape, that kind of stuff. That one's kind of fun. but I kind of wish they made the targets look a little better. Moving targets is a good one. I like doing this one for just kind of moving drills. But like all the old ones, they give you all kinds of options, more options than before. Randomly reverse pass, you can decrease the size each time you shot it, pop up with no shoots. Some of these I think could have been either thought out a little bit better, or I'm just not understanding kind of the intricacies of it. For example, like the randomly reverse shot, I would kind of hope every now and then to move back and forth, but either I have it going too fast or too slow, because it almost never changes direction as you hit it. And I would think eventually it would move back, and maybe it does, but maybe it's one of those I have to set up for more iterations. But like the other ones, it's still a fun one. I like that one just kind of for constant drills, because it allows you to change the speed and angle. This one is probably the one I kind of use the most, just because it's kind of a fun speed drill that allows you to really kind of get iterations in. You have shoot and no shoot targets, and you got to shoot each one of the shoot targets while not shooting the no shoot targets. Each time you hit all of them, it kind of spins it around. On one of my certs, what I like to do is kind of really crank up on the trigger pull. That way I'm getting kind of an exercise out of this, and you know, to do this for like 30 seconds, I believe, it gets really tiring. This is a fun one to do, you know, if I'm running the AR with the cert, or I'm doing the pistol with the cert, that maybe each time I clear it and I switch it out from the rifle to the pistol, or pistol to the rifle, or switch positions, or switch hands. So a lot of these drills allow you to really kind of modify and play with it, which works great when I'm working with students or in a classroom setting. The next one we have is the tracking drill. This one, I use this one quite a bit too. Each time you shoot it, it moves in different directions, and it gives you all kinds of different options. It allows you to move by and switch. So as it goes, you hit it, and it just kind of changes the angle. This one's fun. There's ways to kind of mess with it and to try and increase it. I wish, and there might have been a setting for it that I missed, that can kind of get it to go faster, because as long as your follow-up shots are really quick, you can kind of allow it to just stay in its own little area, which is a good training, drill within itself, to try and keep it in its own space, because otherwise you end up kind of losing it. But it's one of those where maybe the vector from every time we shot it, it would move a little bit more. But it's still a pretty good one. I think I'm going to try and see if I can get it to go faster, because once you play with it a little bit, it really kind of becomes not predictable, but if I try and increase the speed some, maybe it'll make it a little bit more faster. So once you hit it, you can kind of see that it starts going by faster, but it's still one of those. And I think by making it go by faster makes it a little bit more difficult than it was originally. The last one you have is generally the transitional drill. And at our school, when we do indoor stuff, this is probably the one I use the most, because what I'll do is I'll have the students start behind a barricade of some kind, whether it be a wall or a door, or we used cardboard dividers. And I would set it up, and I don't think I set it up to demonstrate it this time. I have to find a video or a picture to show. But we would set the options to where there'd be a long transition. So as you can see, every time you shoot it, instead of it moving like it did before, it would pop up somewhere else. So what we would do is set a long space in between it. So we would have them get behind the barricade, and they would have to slice the pie until they find the target and shoot it. And then they would have to get behind the barricade so they can't see the target anymore. And then they would have to go and try and track it again, both the right side and left side. And what made it interesting is when you started adding things like no-shoots. Because then they would keep looking and looking and looking and find a no-shoot target that they can't shoot. The only downside about that is that once they find the no-shoot target, you're kind of stuck there for a while until the no-shoot target goes away, depending on the FaceTime timer. They improved that a little bit on this one. because at least now you can kind of set the FaceTime, how long you want it to sit in front of you before it goes away. And I think, you know, that made this one so much more fun than it was before, because that one was one of the ones we used the most often at school, just because it was really good at getting good cornering and good slicing the pie motions in. So as you can kind of see, I mean, almost everything across the board in this version just looks so much better than it did before, to where now it doesn't really so much look like an early 2000 Flash games, that this is something that I don't really mind showing off to students or taking to demos and stuff like that to have people play with, because it really kind of looks, you know, professional now. It looks really good, and a lot of the complaints I had from before have gone away. But like I was saying, my favorite part has to not do with this. What I end up doing is a lot of times is not even using the smokeless range, is I just go ahead and I use the camera itself. So instead of starting up smokeless range, I start up the camera. This allows me to use the smokeless range with not only the drill software it comes with, but also outside games and, you know, different Flash games and games I've picked up off of Steam, and, you know, different computer games, anything that allows a mouse input. So what we're going to do now, or more likely in the next video, is I'm going to show you a whole bunch of different games and different setups, different stuff that you can do outside of the drills that come with smokeless range.